Okay. And I would like to, I know we're running short in time. It's the end of a long day, so I'll just charge ahead. But let me say at the beginning, I see you all as part of the panel, so please join us. It's a pleasure for me to be here. I'm Margot Thomas. I'm going to ask every person on the panel to introduce themselves and also to take their pick of one of the 6 questions and say from their perspective, because I haven't been following the workforce discussion, how do you define workforce? I know we have a question about stakeholders, but in terms of workforce, do you see the immediate KM worker or knowledge worker as the workforce? Or do you see this as something in concentric bands where it almost bleeds into stakeholders, right? And from that perspective, then, what does this mean for the center and how it can provide support, interact with, and add value for this workforce as we define it? Something else that I'd like to put on the table is that, as we know, with rapid globalization, the workforce is itself becoming more and more globalized. Within corporations or within institutions, workforces cross borders and boundaries. And that raises a whole series of cultural issues as well. We had the previous speaker talking about the European versus the North American perspective implicitly. And that's just one aspect. But then when you think about learning and how we perceive knowledge, how we share knowledge within cultures, it varies dramatically. Another dimension that I think we could talk about is just looking around this room. It's a very much intergenerational workforce. And different different groups, whether you're a millennial or a Gen Xer or whatever, clearly learn differently, share knowledge differently, and interact differently. And I think this has implications very much for how the center positions itself. So just keeping those 3 things in mind as you choose one, and then we open up the discussion. So Leslie, who happens to be a colleague of former colleague of mine.
Thanks, Margot, and thanks, Denise, for inviting us. I'm Leslie Schneier. I used to work at the World Bank. I retired just over a year ago, and am now working with the World Bank Alumni Society, which is changing its orientation from retiree to alumni. Anybody who's had 3+ years of service at the bank is entitled to join. So that's my new focus, and it's the challenge to the alumni. And this is what I'm focusing on. Workforce is what we were talking about earlier, the encore kind of work. So the challenge from the new World Bank president to the Alumni Society, who said alumni are an underutilized resource. And he challenged us to capture and curate and share our knowledge of development with the rest of the organization. So that's what I'm doing as a volunteer. And so I think that is a piece of a segment of the workforce. And we're working pro bono. We're providing advice and guidance and just-in-time troubleshooting and mentoring. It's all pro bono. So that's a piece of the workforce. Somebody else talked about AmeriCorps, I forget who, but so that's also volunteers. So volunteers are an important part of your workforce. And those who have retired and or left your organization have knowledge that they want to connect. Boeing, where's the lady, the Boeing Bluebirds I learned about. I don't know if they still call that, but that you bring back people. I've been learning a lot about what other organizations are doing. So some organizations allow you to keep your email address, which keeps you connected. Cisco, I think it was, gives you a cell phone, provided you keep your profile up to date. You use the cell phone. It means I can find you. So these kind of things where your organization is starting to tie back in as part of your knowledge strategy, to tie back to you once you have left, and certainly once you've retired. So And I think the piece I would focus on is engagement, because it's becoming an issue that at least I'm struggling with now, is how do we engage people, especially the older generation who haven't grown up with social media, who I have a fledgling website, collaboration site. They send me stuff to post. So how do I get them? They're used to email. They can read websites. But that's another whole dimension. It's so how do you engage different generations? They work differently. They think differently. They interact with the technology differently. So that's what I would say. And seeing Denise said we're an international panel, I'm originally from South Africa.
Charles Courtney Simon. I'm in the public sector with the U.S. Office of Personnel Management. I, like Mary, worked and have worked over the last 3.5 years on open government initiatives. And I think one thing that needs to be made clear is it's been an evolving interaction. It has progressed from the 3 pillars that Mary talked about to also include the digital governance strategy, as well as recently the open data policy. And so some of the things that we struggle with is connecting the dots for the federal workforce to understand, number one, that as the federal government has progressed, we've moved away from a lot of the transactional duties that are clerical. And so each federal employee is basically their own clerical or administrative aid. And because we have this capability, all of these capabilities, and we can produce all of these documents, we also need more training on how to store, save, transmit these documents, not just because of the security and privacy issues, but just because we want to share it. We want to share, we attempt to share, but because we don't organize things so well, even the stuff that we try to share isn't readily available. Someone else talked about that earlier. It is critical that the Senate look at how to create that ontological discussion. Now, there are instead of having these protracted discussions and arguments about what to call things, there are tools that will literally, resolve that debate for you. And we need to take advantage of those and expose the wider audience to those tools, because if that message gets out, we come to this moment where the business sector, the non-governmental organizations, unions who are our partners, we're talking about the workforce. All of us are data students. It's every person's responsibility to properly handle their documents. And then all of a sudden, lots of things can occur. The earlier example this morning of the use of API and how powerful that is with a presentation link that allows us to talk to the legacy system and extract the data, so that instead of the American public sending a request for a particular report, if it has been vetted and cleaned, they can generate their own report. Self-help. See, that's the age we're in right now. I wear 2 cell phones. Neither one of them rings. I'm very responsive to email because I also have to respond to text. I do the social media stuff just because I'm interfacing with multiple generations. And it's not so important that I'm totally comfortable with how we communicate, but that I'm accessible. And so we have to understand that this accessibility issue is going to be critical for the center. I hate to tell you this, but the minute you put the word economy next to knowledge economy, that assumes they're going to be have and have not. Okay, because there is no level playing field currently. And if there isn't a plan to bring the have-not to a level playing field, they will always be behind. There will always be winners and losers. Anytime our society transitions, from the dark ages into the information age, so there will always be a segment because you got people who don't want to move to the next phase. You got people who aren't equipped to move to the next phase. And then we got people that we're just not going to let in. So I guess I'll say all of that to say what kinds of activities the center should be trying to focus on is those kinds of activities that help people to learn better how to handle documents, and those kinds of activities that make people want to do it. Mm-hmm. Because it doesn't matter what technology is available. I'm sorry to say that, technology, but we have a tendency to focus on the magic bullet. We want to go out and push the button and make it happen. But if people don't see anything in it for them, if the culture change is not there, if we can't help organizations develop the kind of cultures where I understand it's my job because I have written a writing and an oral standard in my performance appraisal, that the way I handle these documents is how I'm measured against that standard. Mm-hmm. So I'll stop there.
Very powerful. Thank you. Please.
Thank you so much. Thank you for accepting the normal medical. I'm born in Romania actually 40 years ago, and I'm French national resident in Norway, and I moved to the United States. I set up a foundation. My purpose is to integrate everything I heard. I worked for a few years for Boston Consulting in France, after the MBA, computer science. And then with my practice, our clients, Norwegian government, government, Swedish government, French, Japan, and so on. The basic idea was what I would call social cultural divide. What we learned, I will give you two figures, not to make an idea American is very popular. In America, you have 6.7 million youth from 16 to 24 years old out of job, out of school. In Japan, they have 1.5 million, what they call hikikomori syndrome. The kids, they're waiting at 10, 11, 12 years old. They lock themselves in the room, and Japanese mothers are very nice, and they serve them. And now they have a second generation. This is, in America, it has been declared last April, so a national security problem. So what do we do? It can't be down to a national program, national strategy that is useful. So this was one of the issues. How do we motivate, inspire, and guide every learner to be relevant in the knowledge divide? We use the expression saying that have some customer value in knowledge divide. So the way we try to do it was in those who are familiar with Norway, Oslo, there's a new meeting on more than famous stuff. During 3 months, we developed the best possible content in high definition about culture and science. So children with parents, grandparents, teachers, they had a sort of journey in knowledge with the best possible content in the world. I remember for UNESCO task force for I had excellent access. It was humbling to see how serious the children, as well as the adults, in particular, having this shared access to nicely presented high-quality knowledge. So then we did the same thing in remote rural areas, also in small cities. We did it in Japan. So one of the key concepts we try to promote is share access to high-quality, motivational, inspirational content. To be more specific, we would like them to think what we call cultural and creative industries. The industrial activities do not create jobs almost anymore, whereas cultural and creative industries do create jobs. So we try to elaborate we handle this at local community level, whether it's rural area or large cities, how to mobilize knowledge from the World Bank, UNESCO, European Commission, other countries, and to empower local communities to engage in what we call knowledge-based economy, and how to manage this paradigm shift. Now, coming to jobs, if I may comment on jobs, what is the workforce we are talking about? I had the privilege to have as a partner for a few years the Ministry of Education, Science and Culture and Research and Sport in Japan, or NEXT in Japan. The Institute for New Learning, we've been working for a few years. So the way we try to do it, and they very kindly test the ideas. And so we think the integrated management of cultural heritage and natural heritage of each local area is one of the sources of job creation. What are those jobs and what are the skills? You start with culture or with nature. You need to document culture, so these are more intellectual, scholarly type of expertise we need. And you need to create, to write a script and to create the visual content, another set of jobs. Then you need to archive that content, particularly when we talk about high definition, another set of jobs. Then you need to access and to use for various applications this content. So whether for cultural heritage or natural heritage, I started with UNESCO in 2000. There's a lot of work which can be done. Each local community has a backyard with nature, with culture, rivers, brooks, flowers, and so on. We discover every year, I was told, 400 new species of fish. So there's a lot to be discovered. But I can't tell you how much you're humbling to see in the most remote area in Norway, to see children documenting it's called shamanic culture. You might have heard of philo-public culture, foresting culture. So they have strange culture, to slash and burn and, to get rice in the mountains. It was quite a very minority culture. The Norwegians do not like to talk about this too much because they had some, Norwegians love to be considered the best in the world about human rights, minority, and so on. Nobody talked about philo-public foresting people there. Now, they lost their language in the 60s, but we discovered they have 600 handicrafts, which are up to the standard, and they have a real culture. They mobilized, and they got a lot of interesting content, and they developed tourism and other things based on this. So the point I want to make is document the culture today in local culture with international framework, or template rather. It's a source of job, like the raw material for job creation. So if that, we identify with Japanese, and particularly Institute in Japanese, what are those the skills we need and how do we train them? So this does not solve all the problems, all the jobs, but it does create the sense of belonging to a community. So these are the type of jobs, and this is probably also my comment about it. And if we have the opportunity tomorrow with your questions, I'll be more than happy to.
So, thank you. This I think makes opens the door for a very broad discussion. If we take Koki's comment, the big phrase I took from you, Koki, is every worker is a data steward, right? Very powerful. Insofar as every worker has knowledge, they generate knowledge, they control knowledge, and they have the ability to organize it in a way that others can access it. And not just the ability, depending on the structure, the responsibility that I took from you. And then we heard from our colleagues here different slices of the concept of workforce and the ability, depending on how you organize it, to generate even more work, right? Because we don't tend to think of knowledge as a factor of production, but increasingly it is, right? And it's taking on from an economic perspective an increasingly more powerful economic personality in this modern world, right? So before I open it up, though, I want to challenge us to think in this very broad framework as we address these questions. And you can see now, I think we've got all 4 or 5 billion people on the globe right in this, this right here. How can the center do this, right? Strategically, you've got to be very careful. I mean, you can't be everything for everybody. And then that brings us to the model, how you organize yourself. And so I would personally like to think of this center as potentially a center of excellence, the best of the best in maybe 3, 4, or 5 key strategic areas, and then thinking about how you develop a business model that allows you to leverage that so that you can potentially touch this vast universe. And I don't have a concept of what it looks like, but I like the idea of leveraging, because then it means that you can actually build relationships. You begin, if you think of a networking model, then it becomes very powerful. I'll stop there because I'm really, really keen to hear your perspectives on this. And I think this is the value that we can bring to this discussion as we think about it. So panelists, whoever is on the phone, please, just identify yourself. And I think we have, what, 10 minutes? I see one hand up. Yes?
I want to talk about that digital strategy thing again, because to me, it's a very concept for the federal government. The federal CIO, and local, came up with a roadmap. And basically what he's trying to do is take the federal government and put them more into shared space. Not becoming so dependent on proprietary software, so that what is created in one agency can be shared in another agency, can be shared in another agency, can be shared with your citizens. Because, you know, we the people own whatever is really created in the federal space if we own it. If we in fact own it. So I guess I'm saying is that collaborative space that kind of Mary talked about, where we talk about the center of excellence, becoming the spot virtually that everybody knows to come to get answers, because everybody makes a deposit into the system that wants to share. You know, to me, that's really the high road. You know, whether it's with Wiki, whether it is, and it's all virtual.
I'd like to just play. Oh, go ahead. I was going to just build on what you were saying, that the phrase that where everybody wants to share. Going back to Margot's comment that knowledge is becoming an economic factor of production. So if I give you this, you have it and I don't, right? But if I share my knowledge, you have it and I have it, and we build on it. So I don't lose it. We share it. and we build on it, and we adapt it, and we recreate more. And that is a key piece, because economics has always been built on this, you know, I give you my labor, you give me some money, and we don't have the same things. Whereas with my knowledge, we can grow it and share it and build on it. So, Denise.
There's no scarcity of knowledge in the knowledge economy. You know, the more you use it, the more it grows. But I'd like to follow up on what Corky said and what George said. Here's an activity maybe we can do now. I found out at a recent conference, I guess it was last November, that the U.S. Postal Service, and of course this makes perfect sense once you know it, developed some software way back when to read handwriting, because there was a day when all the letters had to be addressed, you know, written out by hand. And they developed that software. It's obviously a public good now, right? But if we could get our hands on that, nobody seems to know where it is or what language it was written in, but if we could get our hands on that, we could apply it to some of the things George is suggesting. We have all those historical archives. You know, we could build a vision or a profile of a city, of a community, based on all those handwritten diaries, you know, letters, etc. And we could look at a way to make that come to life very quickly, which would give us more of a sense of place at the community level. Yeah.
I'd like to ask the panel a question. We're dealing with the workforce here. And I think there are certain facts that we need to take into consideration when we look at point 4, the primary products of the centre being the mobilisation of intellectual capital. Now, ever since the financial collapse of a few years ago, we lost a lot of jobs. And there is a key question is, will these jobs ever come back? We have an unemployment rate now of 7%. Some people say the real unemployment rate is actually 14%, and it won't really go down. The jobs that are coming back are part-time jobs, they are different jobs. As one of our panelists mentioned, young people are leaving university, and they're not going into the workforce for months or even years afterwards. And when they do go into the workforce, it's not at the level they expected. At the other end, there are people trying to retire. Some want to retire at 60, 65, but the threat is that in order for the entitlements to carry on, they can't retire until they're 68 or 70. So what you're having is an increasingly stretched workforce that possibly has been hit really badly by the recession, and with jobs that may never come back. And we have the statement that no one has a job for life anymore. That seems to be a given. Given all these factors, my question is this: what can the centre do to mobilise this intellectual capital so that agility and flexibility seems to be required and called for, can be passed on to people so that they can get into the workforce, can stay in the workforce, can move around in the workforce, and can keep themselves viable for, you know, the decades that they may have to work. Given that we've got a changed situation from the times when it used to be a job for life. That to me seems to be a key question and a key challenge for the centre. So I'd like to know your ideas on this.
Speaking as one of those members of that lovely unemployed youth group, my question about this is a little more concrete about these. Looking, you know, when I apply for positions in this field, you know, I mean, the knowledge management is an inherently interdisciplinary field, which draws on a lot of different skills. Nevertheless, at the end of the day, when it comes to the jobs that knowledge jobs that people will actually undertake, they will be closer to certain established functions, disciplines, fields, skill sets than others. And I mean, my personal background is more along the computer science, information architecture. Some of the jobs that I see in the field are closer to communications, social media. So when we consider what the actual positions of knowledge management and knowledge workers will look like, what do you think they actually are?
Very good question. I think we've got two big ones here. And Paul, thank you.
I have many ideas, but I have to say that I'm right. General terms, centralized the one you want to give should be first of all connected to the best resources, intellectual and known resources in the world. So, when I started the project with UNESCO in 2010, after heritage, I could not find any other center in the world that has its own institution to document this knowledge, expertise, and scholarly knowledge about intensive after. I could not have done anything. My director general, I mean, Mr. community, everyone accepted. So, one thing, generally speaking, in my opinion, also connected to the World Bank, what the World Bank is doing. The World Bank is changing. They have now going to launch, announce their strategy. So, international institutions plus trend-setting countries. For instance, Japan has an approach working for several years, what I would call best practice, how to motivate young generations to get involved in Africa handicraft. They call it e-handicraft. Now, this will get knowledge about those best practices in the world. Norway is doing something else. So, first, I don't know yet how quickly one can create a job, but to make the point that partners, then setting partners, national organizations, institutions, international organizations forward. I have in mind, I don't know how you can manage it, but as an academic, local community, I think can be done. But this partnership, in my opinion, should be one of the highest priorities for the center. Now, the second issue is center excellence, which I would call model center, center expertise. Center excellence is more related to industrial business, making this type of approach. But you should identify what are the critical businesses which can create competitive effect. Sometimes they are related to, if you are in a mountain area, of course, mountain-related expertise. If you are on the coastal area, so there are some criteria to identify where each local community, given their profile after national heritage, can become competitive. Because all of us are starting now. So identification is difficult. You just can't cover everything, but what is given as inheritance. The third thing we do, we try to collect what we call candidates for best practices. Someone is a leader in a technology in clean air, for instance, or leader in a technology in research for education. So we need to know the best in the world as much as we can and what we can do with it. So these are the three approaches. As far as the workforce, I can't say more than what I just mentioned, but if there are more questions, more.
I know Leslie wanted to add, and then I'll okay, and then I do want to come back to because I think they're parallel.
Yeah, and probably Denise has much the same that I have to say about the trends and jobs in KM. I mean, if you think back to when we all started, we started with systems. We started borderline pre-internet days. It's hard to think that that's like 15 years ago. So, yeah, we were playing, right? So the focus was technology. It was computer tools, it was content management, it was information architecture, and that sort of thing. And then it moved to, like you were saying, communication, social media, collaboration. And I think all of those things, if you're looking for a knowledge job these days, if you look on LinkedIn, you'll see their knowledge and communications, knowledge and marketing, social media, collaboration, networking, and of course, a lot of them are content management still. I think all of those, these are becoming a much more focus on these kind of jobs, whether they split into narrower disciplines or broaden to include one another, I don't know.
So, if I could add, and Denise, I know you said it needs to be strategic, so I was the one who said that. But when we think of the center as being transformational, because I think that's part of your mission, to be transformational, and to empower your stakeholders and your constituencies to think about knowledge differently, as this concept of knowledge in the knowledge economy is constantly evolving, right? I think one of the most powerful things that you can do for all of these constituents is to get each individual to understand on a personal level what their knowledge means in that context. So visually, you can envision somebody like yourself saying, this is what I believe my knowledge is. How does it map on to what the requirements are? And actually give that individual the power to then decide where it is I can best target my interests and my abilities. And I think that in itself gives one the power not just to look at employment in the traditional sense, because that's what's happening. When you talk about this 14% unemployment rate, I think there are many ways to slice that. And I think what we really have is underemployment, because many of those people are in fact employed in some way or other. Now, if we redefine the economic value of knowledge, then we are in fact opening the door for these unemployed, underemployed, to utilize that value to their advantage. And within the economy, it's how you price it and how you extract value.
May I follow up on that? Okay. And I think it's important for us before we can help someone else understand the value of their knowledge, we need to see it and respect it. Okay. So as Mills knows, sometimes when I'm driving from Ohio to Washington, I listen to Mad Dog truck radio. Okay. And we're all laughing, but I have to tell you, I was really impressed when Matthew said that he was doing long-distance trucking, because I am amazed at what those guys need to know in order to do their job. The other thing I'm amazed at is how little they get paid and how much they have to shell out of their own pocket to be in that profession, right? And I got to tell you, our economy runs on these guys, right? And they run on Goodyear, right? Those tires, right? So this all comes together. But if I look at a truck driver as somebody who is not a knowledge worker, then, I'm the problem right here. And if I go to Walmart, right, because I know that those people are underpaid, they work really hard, et cetera, so I want to give some support to them. But I talk to the people at Walmart, and you will be amazed at how much knowledge there is, underemployed knowledge there is working at Walmart. You've got machinists retrieving carts from the parking lots in Walmart. This is all a huge knowledge base that I'm not sure those of us in the big organizations or in academia even recognize as knowledge. So I think we have to start with ourselves.
And if I know we've got to end, but to me this is where the power of the leveraging comes. Because if you take that concept and apply it on a global scale, and you've got Georgia's example of people in the rural areas of Norway. Myself, I have a combination of Caribbean and wherever else, I don't know anymore. Can you imagine what we can do globally if this center were able to leverage through collaborative arrangements with other parts of the world? You can change this discussion.
Then just a comment. We use, I'm trying to say what we've been doing, because thinking conceptually we can do all this stuff popular. But the idea is we use the concept of modal local area, whether urban or rural. My question is to you, is it possible to develop almost, I would call it, generic knowledge, and and you design the model and you disseminate. And rural area obviously different from New York, of course. So these are available now. There's a lot of work and can be done. You can't imagine how much you don't need 2 billion scholars to teach you about. I apologize.
Yes, I think we're at the end of the session.
I want to take a poll. We have one more panel left, and we're just at 5:30. Do you want to proceed with the final panel today? Would you like to start with the panel tomorrow morning? How many people will be able to come back tomorrow morning? Looking pretty good. Would you mind? And then I think we're a little bit fresh with that. Yeah? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. This was outstanding. Thank you. Thank you.